Today on Chris Dyer's Creative Friends.
Trust your inner vision of your own artistic identity. Draw in sketchbooks. I think a lot of great development can happen in that medium that can then translate into other mediums. Definitely don't worry about what other artists are doing. Just go deeply into your own identity and see what is between you and your higher self or creator, however you want to look at it. There's an intimate connection that the two of you have, and that there's special artistic gifts that are yours and yours alone. Mm-hmm. So I would say to just, focus on yourself and your own work.
Xavi, woo! Thanks for having me over.
Yeah.
You were telling me about the magical palace of ML.
Yeah, the legendary Magic Funk Palace in San Francisco.
Uh-huh.
It was kind of a cultural hub for the psychedelic community and the visionary art community back in the, late 90s and early 2000s.
Wow.
And Carrie Thompson lived there. And that's where, I think it was at that house, which is where I first saw the work of the Further guys, particularly Mars and Damon. That's when I discovered those guys.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you met them in the late 90s, early 2000s?
I met them in the early 2000s.
Okay, so that's ages ago.
They already had their crew, and I was hanging out with Carrie Thompson and Luke Brown, and we were doing our visionary art thing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I wanted to ask you about Ashland first before I go into your personal roots of art and the roots of visionary art. I feel you're one of the historical people who can really, inform people of where it all came from, which I think is very important and one of the main reasons why I do this show. But where are we right now?
We are at my new art studio in Ashland, Oregon.
Uh-huh, nice. How long have you been living here?
I've been living in Ashland since about 2015, and I just started this studio this winter.
Okay.
So it's a fresh studio, finally got it set up. I lost my home and studio, everything in the fires here in 2020.
What happened?
There was wildfires in Southern Oregon, and my warehouse was in the fires.
So your whole warehouse burned with what was in there?
My entire life's work, all my sketchbooks from my whole life, going back through childhood.
Oh no.
20 years worth of hand-cut stencils, my entire collection of costumes that I had made over the years, and just countless other pieces of art. That painting, Podular Manifestation, the big one, the original of that, was in the fires.
Oh
and
no, that's
a bunch
such
of other
classic.
ones. Yeah. So I lost literally everything.
How sad were you about it?
Oh, I was very sad and traumatized.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's like a life-changing event, and shocking in a way that's hard to describe. Really profound experience, and a lot of letting go and lessons of reality and impermanence.
Do you feel like, obviously you didn't like it, but do you feel you grew and something positive came from letting go of all of that?
I think in some mysterious way, the forces of the universe were at work, and some good things, magical good things suddenly started happening in my life after that fire. Mm-hmm. So it makes me feel like there's some mysterious way in which things work in life,
Mm-hmm. No, it's good to surrender. How is Ashland? Is it a cool art scene? Is it like a hippie contingency? Tell me a little bit about this place.
Well, Ashland's interesting. If you look at it on the map, it's halfway between Portland and San Francisco, and it's only 2 hours from the coast. And so we're kind of right in the middle of nature here. So we live out in the middle of the mountains, lots of beautiful scenery and lakes and rivers, and lots of snowboarding. We have a ski resort here in town, so I snowboard tons in the winter.
Nice.
And
it's close to Shasta.
Close to Shasta, we snowboard there too. And it's a peaceful, beautiful, easy place to live. It's very calming and kind of grounding here. So in a way, living here is like a sanctuary and like a retreat, from the, being out in the world, which I'm out in the world a lot. So it's nice to come back to here as my home base.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you have like a community of resident artist friends, etc. out here?
Yeah, definitely. There's like a small group of professional artists that live here that have all been here longer than me. But yeah, also the Schneider Museum of Art from SOU, Southern Oregon University.
Okay.
The Schneider Museum kind of holds it down with art and culture over there. They have amazing shows at the museum, which we go to regularly, and they support things that happen in the community. Like the mural that I painted on this building was sponsored by the Schneider Museum for their art exhibit that they did called Art Outside. So it was like outside art exhibits.
Okay.
So yeah, there's a thriving arts community here, but it's small, but it's, everyone knows everyone.
Yeah, much muralism out here or less?
Historically, no murals here. But that's starting to change. There's just now starting to be little murals popping up here and there. Medford, which is the city up the road about 15 minutes where the airport is, there's more murals there because they have less restrictions there. So yeah, we're hoping to get more murals in Ashland.
Nice. Yeah. Well, let's start with the beginning. You have roots in both graffiti and old school 90s rave poster culture. Can you tell us a little bit of when you started doing art, what influenced you, how you got into it all?
Yeah, well, I started drawing when I was a kid in elementary school, and we had some art books in my house. We had a big MC Escher book in my house, so that was my first download of drawing.
So great.
Yeah, so my first idea of what drawing is was from the imagination. It's an infinite possible dimensions of art, and that art is literally visual magic in the way that MC Escher did magical tricks with your eye and with art, and he used math and geometry and traditional drawing. And so that, I didn't know it at the time, but that was really programming my mind to how I think about drawing. And so ever since I was a little kid, I naturally wanted my sketchbook to look like that level of drawing. So I just was always doing this highly detailed #2 pencil drawings in my sketchbook, and just pages and pages and that's all I did all day, every day growing up, was just draw, 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 draw. And then in 3rd grade was when I saw the drawing TV show Secret City with Commander Mark. And that was popular in the 80s. And he was the guy who wore a drawing spacesuit, and his art studio looked like an outer space station.
So cool.
Yeah, and he had a big drawing board up, and he would teach kids the fundamentals of drawing. So like, today we're gonna learn how to draw 3D objects, and today we're gonna learn shading, and today we're gonna learn perspective.
So cool.
And then like a robot would come out and like draw something, and like, it was, that show I was obsessed with. So I would like come home from school and sit there and watch that show and be like drawing.
Wow, I never heard about it.
Yeah, check it out, Secret City. It was the most epic kids drawing show, and it influenced a lot of artists from our generation.
Nice.
Too. Yeah. And then about 6th grade, from skateboarding, I was introduced to graffiti art in Washington, D.C., and that was the moment that my life changed forever. And
what year was this, 6th grade?
89.
Okay.
Yeah, 89 was when the graffiti thing started. And, it happened in a couple of stages. I saw some graffiti in my area, and at some point it became more than an interest. It became an all-consuming obsession that was something I'd never experienced in my life. that was at the level of some type of a religious experience. So hard to describe, but when I would get a glimpse of some master level graffiti, which was very hard to see, you basically couldn't find it.
Where were you living at that time?
In Fairfax, Virginia, right outside Washington, D.C.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you were like around 12 years old, something like that.
Yeah, sixth grade, seventh grade. And so at this time, there's no internet, no graffiti magazines, nothing like that. And so if you're just a little kid like me, I'm just now finding, I'm like, what is this thing? And like, I see like a little 1-second clip in a rap video of some ultimate level wild style piece in New York City that the rappers are walking by in the video. And I see that, and it's like I'm being struck by lightning, And so I slowly became more and more obsessed with graffiti to where it like took over my life. And then I think it was 91, Thrasher magazine posted an article called Aerosol Kids.
Okay.
And it featured the art of Twist, Barry McGee, and Phase 2, and I think maybe Vulcan, I'm not sure. But that was when I first discovered Twist and found out, there's this whole other style of graffiti that I didn't know about. And
more character-based.
Yeah, and just such a unique style. So I've never seen anything like it. And that Aerosol Kids article, in the end of the article, there was a little thing right at the bottom that said, if you want to order Phase 2's graffiti zine from New York called IGHT, International Get Hip Times, which was the original graffiti magazine from New York. It was like a printed zine. They're like, you can order the zine at this post office box from New York City.
Wow.
And it was like literally like this big at the bottom of the
super on the down low.
Yeah, and so I just made out a check, or I had my parents do it, make out a check with a letter that says, I would like to please get the zines. I want every single one of them, every issue.
Yeah.
And I sent it to New York, to this post office box. And
hoping for the best.
Yeah. And then a few weeks later, I get a package in the mail from New York City, open it up, and it's every issue of IGHT zine from New York. And we're talking the real deal, like the sickest graffiti in the world, and 11 issues of it. And literally my mind just exploded.
Right.
And so I was totally all consumed. All of a sudden, I'm seeing the names of every graffiti artist from New York, Australia, Europe. And so I was the only kid in the DC area that I even knew of that even had these. Because if I had them in my backpack going to skate spots, nobody else had. No, I was the only person that had them.
Yeah. These were made by Phase 2, you said?
Yeah, it was Phase 2 in Vulcan's magazine.
Yeah. A lot of people have shouted out Phase 2. You want to say like who
he's
he was?
OG. He's one of the OG subway graffiti artists from New York, and he's one of the early artists to break outside of letter forms and go into abstract expressionism with spray paint.
Awesome.
Very early on.
Yeah.
We're talking 70s. Yeah.
So when did you decide to like grab some cans and try it? Where and when? And
yeah, right around that time. I was real young, and I got some spray paint from the hardware store. I think we were shoplifting back in those days.
Yeah. Got a rack.
And like running out the door as they realized we were stealing spray paint. But yeah, I got a few cans together, like Krylon, blue, red, yellow, green, black, white. That's the end of the color palette, but I was stoked. I was like, I've got these colors and black and white. So we went down to the train tracks near where I lived and on the highway overpass, and went under the highway overpass. And that's where I did my first piece under there at night. Snuck out and painted a big piece of my name. My sister was there and she kept a lookout. And yeah, just filled it in with all this red, yellow, and green, blue stock tips, and then outline it with black, and put big fat shine marks on it with the white, you know.
You still got pictures of it?
Oh no, I don't have pictures. I lost all my photos in the fire.
Oh man.
So yeah, I wish I still had pictures of that stuff. It was, you know, definitely
Historical.
historic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then it just grew from there, and then the next thing, in like '91, we saw an ad in Airbrush Action Magazine, because we used to look at Airbrush Action Magazine, because I started airbrushing in 9th grade or 8th grade. So Airbrush Action Magazine was really dope back then, and that's where we would see a lot of stuff and like inspire us to like paint T-shirts and stuff like that. And you know, that was really hot back in those days.
Right. Still had like a foot in hip hop culture.
Yeah, yeah. And I saw an ad in the back of Airbrush Action Magazine for Can Control magazine from Los Angeles. And it was a step-by-step of a piece that said Can Control by Risk, WCA.
Right.
Who's a legendary graffiti artist who's still prolific today.
Uh-huh.
And so I immediately ordered every issue of it and sent a check to the P.O. box, same thing. But then months went by with nothing.
Oh.
And I was starting to have anxiety about it because I really wanted this, you know. And then one day in the mail, suddenly this big, huge package comes in the mail, and it's all 3 issues of Can Control, 1, 2, and 3, which were the only issues at that time. Full color magazine, which was the first full color magazine in graffiti, like ever. So every page you turn is just another level of your mind getting blown. You know, just like I would open the page slightly and then just turn it.
You just
and
like,
then open it and oh my God. And then you have to slowly open the page, and then like you see the whole production in front of you, and your mind just.
So what year is this? Once again,
That was like 91, 92. Yeah.
Wow. So
And
cool.
my brain was just pulsating. I was in a enlightened bliss. I was in a psychedelic bliss state of a religious graffiti enlightenment.
What an interesting connection to a culture that was just being birthed at the time. It almost seems like you're remembering something that was ingrained in you.
It was more than an interest. Like I said,
Seems familiar.
I identified, this is who I am.
Yeah.
This is deeply who I am. And I saw the graffiti. It was hard for me to connect the graffiti to a human source because I felt like it was being downloaded from a higher dimension, which I think it was being channeled through these artists because it was such a powerful visual force at the time and so new and dynamic that graffiti blasted everything else out of the water in terms of its visual power.
Right.
So no other art interested me except graffiti. Everything else just looked boring to me. And then I would see some new graffiti and it was just like so sick I couldn't even.
Yeah, full of novelty, originality,
total novelty,
illegal, so it's not even supported by society. Like you almost like gotta like break into a place to.
It was a form of alien language, you know.
Yeah, secret language too. Like people can't even understand what it says.
And the characters. It was just so radical.
So tell me more about you doing graffiti and then mixing that with the rave culture of the 90s that you were getting into.
Yeah, so I was just trying to get good at graffiti full time in high school, like any graffiti kid, just drawing in my piece book and practicing spray painting tons. And actually in that Can Control package that I opened up was my first packet ever of graffiti caps.
Oh, yeah.
Because those were brand new too. So it was the first thin tips and fat caps.
For Krylons.
For cans, for Krylons. And so trying those out, it was like, this is a whole new world. Now I can make my stuff look like these guys out in LA, like Slick and Risk and Hex, the masters from LA who I worshipped. By this point, I was totally worshiping the Los Angeles style of graffiti, which was, you know, Slick, Hex, Risk, and all these OGs out there. UTI, CBS, WCA, all the big original LA crews. And that was highly influencing me at that time. And then, in '94 is when some local skaters and punk, like skinhead punks from DC, started going to raves and clubs, because there was a big like house music and techno scene in DC, and they introduced me to that, which I'd never heard of it before. But it was the punks that were like, we're going to a rave. You know, we went to a rave this weekend, you know, or like at school, and they're like, we went to a rave.
Because once again, it was like a secret, counterculture, illegal,
super underground. Yeah, super underground.
Strange situation.
Yeah, extremely underground. And I was like, rave, what's that? They're like, it's where they play techno music and you dance all night long in a dark warehouse with lasers going. And I was just like, whoa, what's that? And they're like, check this out, this is techno. And like, I got a mixtape of some techno. I was like, I don't know, man, this is kind of cheesy. Because it was just like kind of a really early techno that sounded just kind of crazy to me. I didn't really know what to make of it. It was just seemed really foreign. And then, this one day we were out skating again with these older skinheads who were already like senior in high school or like out of high school. And we're like over at one of their houses, and the guy just puts on a mixtape, and it's some serious like deep house, like some really good like progressive house techno stuff, completely different from what I'd heard. And all of a sudden it was like, I felt like my mind was being overtaken by angelic sonic forces of like, I felt like angels were coming down from outer space and like massaging my brain. And I was just like listening to these waterfalls of sound and just pulsating, cascading synthesizer patterns. And I had a complete meltdown. Like I was laying on the bed, just like I'd never experienced anything like this in my whole life.
Wow.
You know, and I just listened to hip hop and punk and, you know, rock and roll and stuff. And I'd never experienced anything like this in my whole life. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard.
And you were sober.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It was absolutely the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. I thought I was hearing the sound of angels from heaven coming down into me. And I walked out of the house, you know, when we were ready to go back out skating, and I came outside and I remember thinking to myself, I said, this is who I am in musical form. Like I have found my music of my whole life.
Wow, that's
crazy. I like immediately became a hardcore raver.
Wow.
Right after that. But I think it's funny and important to note that it was the hardcore punks who introduced me, because it was such an underground scene that there was no prejudice against it. It was not considered corny or commercial. It was really deep. And
it was just new.
Yeah, it was just so awesome. We were just like, oh my God, this is amazing. And so, yeah, the scene in DC and Baltimore was really dope, and it was connected to the Philadelphia and New York scene, and then Chicago and St. Louis, and the whole eastern seaboard, and even down to Florida, had a really vibrant rave culture, which I kind of became part of. And there's a shop in DC called Music Now Records, started by the legendary Scott Henry and DJ Feelgood, and I think others that I don't know. But that's where I first saw rave flyers. And remember, you know, we'd go into Music Now, and it was like you had to walk up the staircase to get up to it, and it was like on the second floor of this building. And the whole entire staircase going up was plastered with rave flyers. And that was like seeing a window into another dimension all over again. It was like the next level of me seeing a window into this other dimension, which was the newly emerging dimension of graphic design via Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop and like early 3D programs. And people were already just coming out the gate making, you know, incorporating this new technology into the underground culture through rave flyers. So you're seeing like all these crazy fonts, like all these crazy high-tech fonts and like 3D spacescapes, you know, on the flyer, like 3D fonts that are like on a perspective, and like all these crazy DJ names, and everything looks super spaced out, but everything has this kind of utopian, positive love and unity
Flirt.
vibe to it. Yeah. And that really affected me and started influencing my art. And that's where the first opening up of a dimension beyond graffiti entered into my work and started going in this psychedelic direction. And then dancing.
Was there any connection before then, or in your awareness, between graffiti and rave culture? Was there any mixing?
Only that there would be graffiti writers would be at raves. You'd run into other graffiti writers at raves.
But graffiti art wasn't on the flyers per se too much. It was more
Not
like
too
a
much.
psychedelic.
Occasionally you would see a little graffiti character on a flyer, but there wasn't a ton of that going on.
But then I suppose the next step is you're going to tell us that you started doing the flyers and you brought in that flavor.
Yeah, that was the plan.
Or invented your own tip for it. Tell us about it.
Yeah, well, like I would say my style of the rave flyers evolved out of an incompetence at using computers. So I was not at all attracted to computers at that time. I was terrified of them and wanted nothing to do with them because it was too foreign and did not feel like drawing to me.
Right.
So when Photoshop and Illustrator first came out, I just avoided it completely. However, I wanted my art to look like it was, I wanted that, and I don't know how to do that with a computer. So I'm gonna try and do that with drawing. And so I purposely tried to invent my own, well, I did. I would just invent my own high-tech fonts because I'd already been doing graffiti lettering for years at this time. So I just started doing these high-tech, futuristic, minimalist fonts, graffiti fonts, and just tried to make I wanted my work to look like it was designed in a 3D modeling program, and yeah, that's pretty much what I did. But I would draw everything by hand and color it with magic marker, color pencil, and I was doing airbrush backgrounds for it, and trying to create these new dimensional scapes, which came pretty naturally for me because I had been drawing surreal imagery from my imagination my whole life. So it just happened like automatically.
Would you say that was already you doing quote unquote visionary art in a way, since it had like a psychedelic interdimensional flavor to it?
Yeah, that period of art was what would be later called visionary art in the West Coast style. But it evolved out of the combination of my style in particular evolved out of the graffiti, the rave flyers, and then dancing and the music was where I started getting more expansive feelings and visions in my mind and wanting to basically visualize what music and dance felt like inside me when I was on the dance floor. And so that's when you started seeing in my work these flowing repeated patterns, like flowing geometric, kind of like spinal things that are all flowing, because I was trying to show the pulsation of techno music. It was so synesthetic to me. I was having a synesthetic experience where I was seeing the music, I was tasting the visual art, and I was feeling art as like a complete sensory experience that was like some effervescent mist that I could just taste and touch. And so I was trying to visually capture that in my work. So that's when my work started getting really juicy and really kind of sensual and visually delicious, like eye candy, which kind of just really fit with the whole rave style, and the whole graffiti style, which was so graphic, and like in graffiti, like everything like had shine marks, highly rendered stuff that looked really shiny and tasty, and so all my work back then was super highly rendered, and always everything had shine marks on it, and I just wanted it to feel like it was sparkling, because that's how it was feeling to me.
Magical and shiny. Hi, we take this little pause from our conversations for me to let you know that I got a brand new art book. This is my second art book, Shamanic Journey, that just came out with Last Gasp Publications. It's a 256-page book, full color, shiny, beautiful pages with full of my art, writing, stories, basically everything I've done in the last 13 years. And I worked really hard on this book. It took me months to lay out by myself, and obviously the art has been a labor of love of many years, and I've condensed it all in this beautiful book that now is available on positcreations.net. You can get a signed version, you can get an unsigned version for a little bit cheaper. And yeah, this won't run out of electricity. On this digital world where we gotta charge everything, or a solar flare could knock out the electricity of the world and you'd be like, whoa, where did all my Chris Dyer go? No, this runs on energy forever. You never gotta charge it, you never gotta water it. It'll always be there to give you new inspiration and art. And I've done this with a lot of love, and I hope that you will get a copy for your own personal library. And reflect yourself in it and make your own book and story of your life. But here's mine, and I hope you will enjoy it. positcreations.net. Thank you.
Magical, yeah.
Were you doing ecstasy those days as you enter that thing, or these feelings and synesthesia, as you say, is some kind of like ESP psychic ability that is part of your being?
Yeah, I personally never did ecstasy at a rave, even though I was a hardcore raver. I just had a really kind of clear intuition that I did not want to do any hard drugs at raves. I never snorted any powders. I never did any E. I never did any psychedelics at a rave ever.
That's quite uncommon.
Yeah.
How come? What was
I was
the
just really
intuition?
sensitive. I was just really sensitive already. I already felt like I was on the razor's edge of kind of a psyche. And I knew from a deep source in me that I was not to do that.
That's good that you had that intuition.
Yeah.
And that you respected your vessel enough to do what you felt was respectful, but at the same time you were like in that scene full, which is overwhelming in itself, even with your heightened sensitivities, but you channeled it back to creativity.
Yeah, like I did smoke weed. That was the one thing I could do at a rave. That's the one thing I felt safe doing. That was the only drug I ever did in like the high school years. So we would get to a rave, and when things were really about to heat up, we would, I would take a couple of puffs off of a joint and then hit the dance floor. And for me, weed was totally psychedelic enough for me. It connected me to the music and the dance floor in a way that just tied it all together and made it very liquidy and unified. And so I would say weed was the psychedelic medium that facilitated a lot of that early, experience that I was having.
Nice.
Yeah, and then I could easily take, since weed is not that extreme, like I could easily take that back with me when I, back to my studio when I was not high on weed.
When did you develop your rave costumes? Because you had this like, Asian hats and these big sleeves and bell bottoms that you had painted, and your painted didgeridoos. You had your whole savvy way of dressing. Was that part of that expression as a raver?
Yeah, that came a couple years later. The clothing creations started after I was, we'd always been like airbrushing gear, but that was different. That was more skate culture. Silk screening t-shirts and stuff, but this was different. This was some costume stuff. And that only came after I was kind of introduced to the hippie, like rainbow gatherings, like hippie world. When my family, we moved from DC to Arizona in '97.
Okay.
And I graduated high school in 95. So we're out there in Arizona. I'm like going to raves, designing rave flyers, meeting tons of people. And so I meet like the drum and bass crew from Northern Arizona, like Sedona crew. And they're a bunch of more earthy heads that I'd never seen that because I'm from the East Coast. And so I'm like now hanging out with these cool Arizona people, and they're like, we're going to this party up in Sedona. So we get to this crazy house party out in the mountains. And there's all these like dready hippies there that are like living out of their van. They're like spinning fire, you know, and they're like boiling pots of chai tea. And like, I'm just like, they're all like wearing like fuzzy like sweaters and like big baggy corduroy pants and like beards. And they look like these Ewok people from the forest. And I'm like, dude, what is this? Like, who are these people? And they're like, oh, dude, they're like hippies, bro. They like fucking live in tree forts in the redwoods and stuff. And they like live outside of mainstream society in their own tribal world. And I was like, where do I sign up? And so, yeah, I was like, I want to be like that. And so I immediately started growing dreads. I was like, I need to get a van. I need the dreads. I want the fuzzy corduroy pants, and I want the fuzzy sweaters. And so they were making, you know, that's when I started meeting like hippie girls that were like sewing their own clothes and stuff and like making these patchwork pants and bags and stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, I'm ready for that. So my mom had a sewing machine, and she taught me how to sew one day. And I just immediately started making patchwork bags and cutting apart pants and shirts and laying them out and taking like fabric and tracing it and cutting it out and started making my own clothes immediately.
It's so cool.
And then it got really creative really fast to where I was basically making crazy remixed shamanic ceremonial decked out outfits head to toe with all kinds of designs and stencils, and it just like it rapidly evolved into like full-blown creative expression. And
so it's kind of like Burning Man wear before Burning Man, or before
well, no, Burning, it was already happening at Burning Man. And so the first time I went to Burning Man was 2001, and the costumes there are what affected me the most that week. Like I saw everyone's walking around in these crazy costumes with EL wire, and that was so next level back then that I immediately was like, okay, costume making is the most insane art form. I'm going full on into this. And so for years, I mean, literally years, I didn't really draw or paint. I just was doing clothing development and costume creations as my main thing. And that was kind of in the festival years. Because for me, showing up at the festival in a new costume was my art form at that time.
Beautiful.
And so
you were the art piece in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was a type of fully embodying your art to where you just physically become it. Yeah.
Nice. So that's, I don't know if your introduction to festivals, but through that you started going more to festivals, and
it was all just happening at that time.
let's get to the part where you start doing visionary art and you find the visionary art world. Like where, at what point in all this development between meeting all these cultures and having all these different expressions and combining them and having your own flavor of it, did you find out something that people were calling visionary art and other visionary artists and a tribe that now is flowering into a whole big culture?
Yeah. Well, it happened in a couple stages. So like my art just on my own, before I met anybody from this scene, just in the late 90s, my art was already like evolving in its own whole way that was becoming quite visionary. And then in 99, a friend of mine introduced me to Alex Gray's art. He had the Sacred Mirrors book. One of my friends from Sedona, he had the Sacred Mirrors book, the first one. And I was like, oh my God, this guy's awesome. And And my work was kind of already going in that direction. So I thought that was really cool. And then I had designed a rave flyer for a party in LA. So I was flying out to LA for the weekend. And we heard that Alex Gray was having an art show at the Rico Gallery in Santa Monica.
Okay.
And so I went to it wasn't the opening or anything, it was just the show. So I went there, I had my portfolio with me of like all my pieces, you know, and I had prints of my work and stuff. And I'm just like this little hippie kid, you know, I already was like having little scraggly dreads and stuff, and I'm wearing all my stuff and looked like a little wook, you know. And I went in the gallery and said, hey, would you give like these prints to Alex Gray? And she was like, oh, well, you can give them to him yourself. He's going to be here in 5 minutes. And I was like, And so Alex came in, and that's where I met him. It was just me and him and a couple other people in the gallery. And I showed him my whole portfolio and gave him prints. And it was just a really great day and like a meaningful moment in my art history.
Beautiful.
And then that's when I felt like, oh, I feel like I'm on this vibe, you know. But that was before I had called it visionary art or anything.
What year is this again? 2001?
It was like 99.
99, yeah.
It was 99
Was
specifically.
he even, I guess he was already talking about visionary art in general.
Well, his book was called Visionary Art of Alex Gray, so that's where the term came from.
But there weren't like a lot.
No,
there wasn't
a
like a
ton.
grouping of people yet.
No,
It didn't
not
even
yet.
exist really as a
No, so that was
movement.
99. So skip to 2003. I still didn't know any other artists doing this kind of more expansive style. And then I had already moved to Ashland by this time. I had a previous era where I lived in Ashland for a few years. But I was here in Ashland, and somebody was like, hey, bro, you need to check out the art of Carrie Thompson and Roman Villagrana. And I was like, well, who are they? And they're like, dude, they're blowing up right now, man. You need to check out their art. Oh, and Luke Brown. And I was like, okay. And so somehow he had like prints of their work at his house, and we're like over at his house, and he's trying to get me to smoke DMT, and I'm like, I'm good, dude. Yeah, I'm looking at their work, and then I ended up meeting Roman at a festival, Trinity Tribal Stomp, way out in the mountains. Connected with him there, and then I found out that they were doing that interdimensional art movement show in Seattle in 2003, and I just freaked out, and like I saw the ad for it in Juxtapose, and freaked out, and my name wasn't on the flyer because I had not even hardly met these guys yet.
Right.
And so I figured out I called Roman or something. I got a hold of them. And I said, hey, I want to be in this show, and I got this new painting that I want to bring up. And so this painting I did called Eternity Vision. It was kind of a visionary painting I did back in like 98. We strapped it to the roof of this janky little car and drove all the way to Seattle, which was like 9 hours, with this painting just like tied to the roof. And it's like a 6-foot painting. So we're just like going all the way to Seattle with this big painting on the roof of the car. And then hung it in the show, and that show is where I met Carrie Thompson, Luke Brown, a bunch of other people. You were in that show.
You
weren't
was in
there,
the
but you
Seattle
were
one
in the show.
2008.
But you were in the show.
Oh,
Your
yeah.
art was in the show.
Yeah, I couldn't, like being in from Montreal, it was
Yeah.
such a hike to make it out there.
Yeah, but I remember the Interdimensional Art Movement show is where I found out about you.
Nice.
And it was the piece with the heads opening up. Yeah. And then,
Nice.
so that's where I met everybody. I think Venosa was there. That's where I met Venosa.
Wow.
So yeah, that was a major
Special.
time. Yeah, and that's when we all got together and felt like this is like a new art movement that is like visionary art, and we're all in this together.
We're
And there
birthing
was-
something special here.
Yeah, and so we just all were like a big clan after that, you know, doing festivals, and that was like, you know, when live painting very first started, and we were doing everything we could to just convince festivals to let us live paint and let us set up a 10 by 10 booth to have as a guy. Visionary art galleries at festivals started as individual artists setting up their own 10 by 10 booth as a vendor. So it was like Roman. Mark Henson was the original visionary art vendor of festivals.
Right.
And, you know, Mark had a big booth. Like he would sometimes have like a 10 by 30 or a 10 by 20 with all his art in it. And that was really the start of visionary art galleries. And so, and then Jen would set up a 10 by 10 or a 10 by 20 and start having prints of all these different visionary artists in there. And then from that is when it started evolving to where there was a separate space that was specifically the art gallery. You know, but it started in the early 2000s and evolved slowly each year to get bigger and bigger.
What would you say is like the first festival that said like, all right, we're having a visionary art gallery, like Shambhala or Boom?
Well, from my experience, that would have been Earth Dance.
Okay.
Earth Dance, Northern California. That was kind of a big one for us back in those days.
Right. And Tribe 13 was like
Tribe
the
13
one and
was-
only
yeah.
people who were holding space for that.
Tribe 13 was, they were who was setting up the visionary art galleries.
How was it being the first live painters at a time that nobody like knew what a live painter was? Like, what was the experience of like, okay, we're gonna paint in front of people and do this performance?
It was pretty nutty. I didn't really get it at first. Like Sound Tribe Sector 9 was having people live painting. Like I know Luke Brown and Chris D and like Jay Garcia and Oliver Vernon, they were like live painting at Sector 9 shows. And I was not in the Sector 9 scene. So, you know, I remember Earth Dance was the first time that I had ever, you know, heard about the idea and like set up the canvas. I'm setting up and I'm like painting in front of people and my easel is set up like in front of the stage and I'm like supposed to be working on a painting in front of all these people, which just felt really weird.
Yeah.
But that's what we're doing now, so this is what's happening. So you just kind of had to warm up to it. But
as a sensitive person, was it like overwhelming?
No, I love being in front of people. I love kind of being in front of people. But for me, it was just weird because I didn't see my art as something that could like happen that fast.
Right.
I was like, I'm like, you know, I take a long time to like plan out a piece.
Right.
And I'm like, go really slow, you know? So when you're live painting, that kind of would all go out the window and you suddenly just are like freestyling at this way faster pace.
Right. Did it change the art a little bit?
Yeah. And for me, it like made it like suck more. Like I would look at the painting at the end and be like, well, that was really fun, but this painting is not something I would want to keep.
But maybe something you could polish later on in the studio with the energy you had accumulated there at the place?
I mean, not really. To me, it just looked like a crazy 2-hour sketch session of a bunch of stuff, but not a serious work of art.
Yeah. Did you ever get to a level with live painting that you feel you did something that you were proud of? Did it get there eventually?
Yeah, after I started using stencils and spray paint for my live paintings, which then kind of started leading into the murals.
Right. When we collaborated at Alchemize 2010,
that was all stencils.
That was stencils.
Yeah.
And, you know, like I did a simple painting and you activated certain parts of it that then I painted on top and it was really fun.
Yeah, that's when it got really fun. I was sitting there noodling away with the paintbrush. I'm just like not feeling it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the stencils and the spray paint, and then which led to live painting big murals. So Symbiosis 2007 was the first time I ever painted a live mural. And as far as I know, was kind of the beginning of any live murals at West Coast festivals, thanks to Symbiosis crew who had the idea of doing a live mural. Just come and paint a freaking live mural, you know? So I did a big graffiti piece of the word symbiosis, and that was kind of the start of the live murals, which I did for many years after that, basically doing like a 5-day mega mural on site at the festival.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. And that's now how you would live paint at an event?
Typically, yeah, like the live murals definitely kept evolving and taking root and getting bigger and bigger to where, yeah, if you look at festivals nowadays, they'll have like a bunch of live murals being painted and very professional, well executed
Now it's a
murals, like
huge
super
thing.
murals, yeah. And now like mural art has blown up,
Yeah.
you know.
I think that's why you and me have affinity. You know, we got along well from the jumpstart when we met in Seattle 2008, and I rolled in with some skateboards, and I felt really awkward in like a totally different scene. But you were like, I like this guy, you know, he's like me, he's street, he's weird. And I didn't know about this symbiosis muraling, like, you know, of course it was like there. But I also would say I'm like one of the first who was doing spray paint murals. Like my first one would be probably 2011 root wire. And I was like, I can't live paint on a canvas, it's too slow. But build me a big wall and I'll spray you something big and fast. And they put it on the stage and I'm fucking smoking everybody else with my fumes. And I was like, maybe next time let's put it on the side. Because like the performers are starting to get high from this shit.
Yeah,
so
the spray paint fumes, live painting was a big issue.
But yeah, anyways, not that I was copying you or following your lead specifically, but we both were doing our street culture in this hippie festival scene. And by now it's interesting to see it develop into like, wow, now there's like 20 to 30 murals in any given festival. How would you see after over 20 years of now the visionary art scene start with 5, 10, 20, 30 people, little by little growing throughout the years. And now it's like hundreds to thousands of visionary artists showing up being like, we vibe with this scene, we vibe with this code, we wanna do art from the other dimension, hopefully attracting the parallel timeline where a positive spiritual reality could happen. How have you seen it develop in good, bad ways? You know, how's it changed in 20 years? How do you observe it as somebody who's there from the beginning?
Well, it seems like in the beginning there were so few artists that every different artist had like a very different and unique style that were often just looked nothing like each other. And whereas nowadays it seems like a lot of the styles have become sort of ubiquitous. So you see a lot of work that sort of looks really similar because they're using the same visual language. And I try to liken it to something like anime or graffiti or comic book art where there's such a well-established vocabulary of visual kind of style that you can come into this now and just immediately adopt like a genre or a style that's already been developed like before you got there. You know, so that's kind of it. It really seems like it's become its own art form at this point.
Yeah, it's like each artist created its own branch of the tree where there's like tens to hundreds of artists that kind of did their own version of it and kept on picking at it. Do you ever feel hurt or disrespected of somebody who would look up to you and influence on your style and do a version of it? Or is it like a flattering honor that somebody would like, you know, lean on your galactic expression and do a version of it and even do a whole career from it?
You know, that's kind of a mixed experience because on one hand, it's flattering that somebody would copy your style. It's like a big compliment. And on the other hand, it can be hurtful when if it seems like there's no acknowledgement of where a style came from. And so I think it's good in art generally to acknowledge where your influences, you know, came from and sort of know the history of the kind of art that you're into and like what its roots are and who the artists were and pay homage to them and, you know, at least have an understanding of it.
Right. As, you know, these branches of the visionary tree come out and new leaves sprout, it's nice to know the branch, the trunk, the roots, like the history of visionary art is out there. And this is one of the reasons why I did this show, to bring the OGs of different generations to express how it was at the ground level of something that
Yeah.
keeps on growing. These days, you're more of a muralist. I don't want to pigeonhole you or say you're one thing. I know you always got a million ways to express, but these days you've been doing these beautiful, amazing murals around the world, both privately, events, etc. Would you still say your art is visionary, or is that just like a label that can't encompass it anymore?
I feel like it. I still feel like it is, because I feel like I'm still doing the same thing I've always done, which is try and express a transcendently beautiful energy of life, like the energy of the creator, the beauty of life's creations, is just overwhelmingly beautiful and infinite in all its forms, as can be seen in nature. And I would say my work these days is most influenced by nature. That's where I get the most inspiration from visually, because everything that I ever loved about art, I still see in nature. I see the geometry, I see the graphics, I see the dynamic movement and the rhythm and the dance of shapes and colors and forms. So yeah, I still feel just as inspired and crazy about art as ever, and I feel that I'm just discovering deeper and deeper realms of art, and always I feel that there's like a realm of like higher spirits, higher art spirits, that they reveal a new layer of the universe to you the more you grow. So like you reach a new level of maturity as an artist, and then suddenly like the art gods will start showing you the next level beyond where you are. And so you're always being pulled forward with visions that are beyond your current level. So in that way, I would say yes, I feel my work is still in the same intention
Yeah.
that it was. Yeah.
You're always expressing spirit, but spirit doesn't stay still.
Yeah, it has infinite forms, and so if the style of my work changes, that's just because if you were to look at the universe in motion, everything's always changing. It's not just because art looked this way in this period of years, it doesn't mean it's going to keep looking like that forever.
Right. You'd be doing a disfavor to yourself if you would just stay at one level. Even though if you found gold, yeah, but what's next? And maybe you're gonna have to like explore and try a couple styles that maybe didn't work or hit as hard as what worked in the past, but then you can find the next gold and strike even better rewards and fruits from it.
Yeah, I mean, one style is just one little pulse of it's just one little pulse in the rhythm. It's just a new one and a new one and a new one, if one isn't hitting, it's no big deal.
So what is your, to wrap this up, it seems like everything you do is an expression of spirit. To me, may you say it or not, you got sensitivity that is, what some people would call psychic or expanded, or a little bit like different perspective than most people. What's your perspective on what is spirit, what is God, what is this reality we live in? Are we in like a, video game that God is playing in his mind?
I think that what is going on here is much more real and more deep and more profound than what any of us can understand. I don't think we're living in a matrix. We're not living in anybody's video game. What we're living in is far, far more deep and real and magnificent and brilliant and genius than any of us can possibly understand. I don't think that there's any BS about life. I think that it's all so much more amazing and real than what we can fully understand right now. And I'm like eternally optimistic and deeply trusting of the creative force that creates all life. Yeah.
Beautiful. You feel the spirit in the matter.
Yeah.
It's not separate. It's not like there's the physical matter world and then outside is a spiritual world.
Yeah, I think that it's so well crafted what we're experiencing that we can't detect the source of it because it is so just finely camouflaged from us. It's so beautifully created that we can't even see how it's happening.
Beautiful. I love your perspective. We're coming to an end of this interview because we got to go to the airport and duck back home. But would you have some final words of wisdom or any suggestions to all the younger artists that peek into the show and, you know, are hearing from a professional artist that have been doing it for decades and succeeding at it?
Yeah, just trust your inner vision of your own artistic identity. Draw in sketchbooks. If you haven't been drawing in a sketchbook tons, I highly recommend drawing in a sketchbook with just a regular pencil. I think a lot of great development can happen in that medium that can then translate into other mediums. Definitely don't worry about what other artists are doing. Just go deeply into your own identity and see what is between you and your, higher self or creator, however you want to look at it. There's an intimate connection that the two of you have, that there's special artistic gifts that are yours and yours alone. And so I would say to just, focus on yourself and your own work.
Yeah, trust your uniqueness.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't poo-poo it when you're looking at somebody who's...
Yeah, don't worry about what other artists' work is.
Right, totally. That's a great suggestion. Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Xavi. I love you, brother.
Love you too.
So great to know you all these years and to share your magic with these people. And thank you guys for watching another episode of Chris Dyer's Creative Friends. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share, and I'll see you next episode. Blessings. Yeah, man. Cool. Yeah, that was great.
Don't forget to smash that subscribe button.
I can't do this.
I love that. I've always wanted to say that.
Yeah.
Like and subscribe.
Next episode, the gas lamp killer.
Enthusiasm, even just for the taste of an ice cream. Enthusiasm for the sound of a song, the feeling of a song. Enthusiasm for your friends and family succeeding. Enthusiasm for your little wins, your little milestones. These little things in life add up to a really present presence, and they help you stay in gratitude. And it's a practice that takes practice.
So please make sure to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Big thanks, and see you next episode. Peace.